Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Laura Griego. I'm the Director of Education and Volunteers at El Rancho de las Golondrinas Living History Museum. Welcome to our final presentation of our 2024 Winter Lecture Series, Speaking of Traditions. El Rancho de las Golondrinas has been putting on this lecture since 1999, and we are happy to partner with the New Mexico Museum of Art. At this time, please remember to silence your cell phones. At the end of the lecture, please exit the auditorium and wait to speak with Dr. Chavez in the lobby if you wish. Everyone can support both Las Golondrinas and the New Mexico Museum of Art by becoming members. Check out our websites for details or join on your way out this evening. It makes a big difference and we really appreciate it. For those of you watching this broadcast later on the Golondrinas Live Sessions, please post any questions in the comment section and they will be addressed. Be sure to check out our website, golondrinas.org, and our social media for details about our exciting upcoming 2024 season at El Rancho de las Golondrinas. We hope to see you all for our Spring Festival opening weekend, June 1st and 2nd. Tonight, we have Dr. Thomas Chavez speaking on the diplomacy of independence, Benjamin Franklin, and Spain. Thomas E. Chavez is a native New Mexican, an independent researcher, consultant, and historian with a PhD from the University of New Mexico. He retired as the executive director of the National Hispanic Cultural Center in Albuquerque in 2004. Before that, he was the director of the Palace of the Governor's State History Museum in Santa Fe for 21 years. Dr. Chavez has initiated and overseen many highly acclaimed exhibitions, programs, and projects at many of the state's cultural institutions. He is the recipient of many prestigious awards, has served on many City of Santa Fe committees, and has both chaired and been a member of the board of directors at many organizations, including El Rancho de las Golondrinas. He has published numerous books and articles and wrote a monthly Sunday article for the Santa Fe New Mexican. His forthcoming book and the subject of this evening's presentation, The Diplomacy of Independence, Benjamin Franklin in the Archives of Spain, expected release date, July 2024, is a compilation of documents pertinent to Benjamin Franklin that are in the archives of Spain and is the English version of the book, La Diplomacia de Independencia, Benjamin Franklin en los Archivos de España, 2019. And now, let's please give a nice warm welcome to Dr. Thomas Chavez.
That's it? Well, welcome all of you to St. Francis Auditorium. Thanks for coming out in, cold, blustery, semi-snowy, almost rainy weather. Perfect spring for Santa Fe. And to see me. Wow. I don't know what to say. I guess I'll just leave. Benjamin Franklin, and here he is, and I want to point this out. It dawned on me late in my career after I don't know how many years researching him. The dude is almost bald. Then he has this long hair. We probably wouldn't even notice him if he was here in Santa Fe today. Look, he's perfect. He's perfect, I think I saw him on the plaza Saturday. Many years ago, over 30 years ago, when I was in Spain researching in the archives of the Indies, I was researching for a book that a lot of you have, dealing with Spain and the independence of the United States. And in the course of that research, I was copying documents to bring back here, and then you couldn't scan and do all that stuff like you can now. There you had to get Xerox copies and order them at the archive and pay for them too, which was awful, And And I kept coming across, and get our technician on the job here, kept coming across the letters that dealt with Benjamin Franklin, and then even a couple of them that were by Benjamin Franklin. And it piqued my interest, but I went on and wrote that book and some other books, but always in the back of my mind was this story of Benjamin Franklin's papers, documents in the archives of Spain that no United States historian knew about or ever used. And it really got me going on the anniversary of his birth in 2006, where the big presses back east hired some Pulitzer Prize winners to write new biographies of Benjamin Franklin. And they all wrote beautiful biographies, but there was nothing new. They just wrote them, because they're good writers. And I read them all, and there was nothing about anything of Benjamin Franklin dealing with Spain. And none of them tapped into that resource. So then it really dawned on me that I should do a compilation of all those papers and go back to the archives and see if I could find more, and have them translated, those that are in Spanish or in French, and publish them in English in multilingual edition. But I, being foolish, quickly realized that I couldn't do it because I didn't have enough time in my little life to finish the project. It would be forever doing this. So I hired a team of people, 4 people. I had an on-the-ground operative in Seville to go to the archives when I had a question for me, so I couldn't, darn it, couldn't go every time I wanted to get to Spain. And raise the money for that team to pay them. And we started translating and filtering through all the papers, and then I would annotate everything, and if there was any historical question or a question about a translation of something because it was from yesteryear, I would look at it and try to figure it out. I was the ultimate arbitrator, if you will. Well, that project went on for almost 8 years to get done. Part of it was that we realized when we started that we needed to go back to the archives and do more research. And when we got back to the archives, of course, we found more documents. And when we found more documents, we found more leads to other archives. So we ended up, going to archives, some of which didn't have anything because things were destroyed or whatever, but others we did find some new stuff. And so that's the background of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And also share with you that book is coming out on July 2nd. And ironically, I love the symmetry of this. The American Philosophical Society, in conjunction with the University of Pennsylvania Press, is publishing that book. Now, some of you, I can hear the mumbling. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, that's because the American Philosophical Society was founded by, guess who? Harketh whatnot, as they would say. And so there we are. And as part of this project, I'm proud to say that 4 books are coming out. 3, this one in July will be the 3rd book. The first book was the compilation of the documents, strictly all done in Spanish. We translated the English to Spanish and the French to Spanish, and the University of Alcalá in Spain published that. And I was having trouble getting it published here until American Philosophical Society, in an enlightened day, figured out they should do it. And in the meantime, we added more documents because we kept finding more. So the one coming out is even an update of the one in Spain. The other thing that happened, and I'll show it to you in a little while, is the Palace Press in one of my favorite museums, for some reason, at the Palace of the Governors, did a limited edition of 80 copies of an 80-page essay that I wrote about Benjamin Franklin, and it's called Dr. Franklin in Spain, The Unknown History. And it's all numbered and signed and everything. Number 6 went to the King of Spain. You know why number 6 went to the King of Spain? Because he's Felipe VI. Yeah, more symmetry, right? And so he has it. I'm sure he has it on his bedside right there. Opposite the Queen, of course. And And so that came out, and I have the last two extant copies. And we used those, the committee I formed also to help raise the money for the team, bought 6 of them, and then gave them out to donors at a certain level. But I still have 2 left over. The money for which will go to the University of New Mexico, who is our umbrella, and then we'll use that money to buy copies of the book to give to libraries and so on. So anyway, there's that story. Benjamin Franklin never set foot in Spain. Let's get that out of the way right now. He never was in Spain. Some of our other early diplomats, like John Adams, actually rode across Spain to get to France and did it intentionally. Arthur Lee tried to get to Madrid and was stopped, so he was in Spain. And of course, John Jay was assigned to be our first ambassador, or second ambassador, I'll get to the first one in a second, to Spain, where he embarrassed himself, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So some of our founding fathers got there, but Franklin wasn't one of them, so that begs the whole question of why am I associating Franklin with Spain, besides the fact that you now know I found all these documents there. And so let's start back at the beginning. Well, let me give you the bigger picture, just so you understand the context here. Our founding fathers rebelled, as you know, and they created a revolution, and they wanted to be an independent country, but they couldn't win their war without the help of other people. And I know we United Statens think that we can do everything ourselves. Yes, I understand that, but it's not true. And it wasn't true from the very birth of our nation. We learned from the football coach who taught us all history in high school. And it's true that the French were there. Lafayette was there, right? We learned that, but we never heard about Spain. Well, Spain was the linchpin that made it all possible. Now, I'm going to do this real fast because we've got to get to Franklin, and I only have 2 or 3 hours tonight to share this with you. Well, there will be a break. So what happened is Spain was given covert aid to the colonies as early as 1777. Actually 1775, now that I think about it. And that aid was getting to the colonies in different ways. It was coming up the Mississippi River from New Orleans, which was a Spanish-held city, to St. Louis, which was also Spanish at that time, then up the Ohio River to Fort Pitt, where Pittsburgh is, and then through the Alleghenies to the colonies. Or they were smuggling it in through their merchantmen and stuff. That was going on. Then Spain got together with France, and they formed a company, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, where Spain and France each provided an amount of money, created this front for more aid to get to the colonies. And that front would use money to purchase weapons and so forth. That gave our historians the image that France was the only country giving support to the colonies, when half of the money used to buy the arms that came out of France was from Spain. So that was all going on before our Continental Congress decided to send a committee. They formed a committee called the Secret Committee of Correspondence, and that Secret Committee of Correspondence decided we need to send representatives to Europe to get allies on our side, because we can't win without them. And of course, Benjamin Franklin was named to that committee, along with Arthur Lee and Silas Deane. Okay, that all made sense. And so then Spain eventually, France declares war before Spain. France thought they were going to trick the British Navy and capture them at New York, and they failed miserably at that. Even the football coach taught us that one. Disappointed George, that's Washington, but we're familiar terms here. George was disappointed that the French Navy came and didn't engage the British Navy, instead went up to New England to offload troops and rest, and then go back to their Caribbean-held islands to protect them. So there was a big failure. And after that happened, Spain got into the war. On January 21st, 1779, they declared war on Great Britain. And that was the thing that changed everything, besides the aid, and I'll get into the aid. Without Spain, I'm happy to tell you, and I stand up here in my full height, which you can barely see over this podium, right? It's just like a head. that without Spain's involvement in that war, we would not have won our independence then. Now, pay attention to what I said. We would have become an independent country eventually, but not with that war, without Spain. It's like Thomas Paine said in Common Sense, it's ridiculous for an island to think they can rule a continent. And it is. Eventually, we would have been independent one way or the other, but it wouldn't have been that war without Spain. And so Spain made it a world war. With Spain, the combined fleets of Spain and France were larger than Britain's, which was a major error in Britain's strategy. And so those two combined navies adopted a strategy set by Spain. And basically it was make the enemy make hard choices. They were the big empire then. They were the big power. But what is important to Great Britain? A cold port in New England, the West India trade, Gibraltar, the Mediterranean island of Minorca, Central America where they were setting up settlements, or how about the Rio de la Plata in South America, where together with their Portuguese allies they were setting up settlements and moving in on Spanish territory. What was going to be important? Oh, and don't forget India. Make them make hard choices. And so one way of looking at the war, and I'm going to say it simply to you, is like a big chess game. If Britain goes here, then Spain and France will go here, or Spain will go here and France will go there and distract Spain. And so, for example, the combined Spanish-French armies laid siege to Gibraltar, and every time that Great Britain sent a fleet to try to lift the siege, France was the first, sent their troops to the colonies. So Lafayette and all the French troops got to the colonies unhindered because Britain was otherwise occupied with defending Gibraltar. Get it? That's how it worked. And that happened a couple of times. 14,000 Spanish troops went to Havana, Cuba, which was their base in the Caribbean. Again, when fleet went to Gibraltar, British fleet went to Gibraltar. And Yorktown becomes the key because the British fleet was distracted over a faked invasion of Great Britain by the combined forces of Spain and France. And I'll get to that in a second. But let's go back to Benjamin Franklin. You have the big picture now. We got our independence because Spain made the war a world war, with fighting all over the world. Some of the most vicious fighting took place in Central America. I know when I tell the football coach that, he just faints. That can't be. Well, it happened. And the largest armada, seagoing armada, went from Spain to South America during that war. And then when you think 22,000 men were laying siege to British Gibraltar, you begin to see that they're making them make hard choices. What are they going to defend? And it's a world war. And our founding fathers could not have won had it not been a world war. That's what defeated Great Britain. So let's get to Franklin. And I even brought notes, which I don't like to do usually, but I want, so many people here, I better do it right. In January 1774, now this is 2.5 years before the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Franklin was in deep trouble. He'd been called out by the British. He was in his 11th year in Great Britain. He even had a second family over there. Even though he left his wife all 11 years in Philadelphia, he's still married, but he had a second, girlfriend. Right? And when he first went to Britain, he went over there to be the conciliator. He was going to convince the British that they should do this and that, and the problems in the colonies would end. But the British weren't listening to him. King George had his own ideas about how the colonies should be treated, and so did the majority of his parliament. Well, things got worse. Franklin's attitude changed, and he started advocating for the colonies. And he got in trouble over the letter that his operatives had captured from Governor Hutchinson of Massachusetts, and it was released to the public. And so now in Britain, He's, at that time, he is a British subject, as every colonist was. I remember my dad, when I was 12 years old, telling me if George Washington had been caught during the rebellion, he would have been executed for treason against the king. They were all subjects, great British subjects. And so now Franklin is called before the authorities in London, where he had to stand there, and they, with public up in the rafters and the balconies looking down, he had to stand there while the government attorneys criticized him, railed on him, questioned him, and then criticized him more. The story goes that he just sat there stoic. Or he didn't sat there, he stood there stoically, never replying to anything, let him accuse him of everything. And so he figured out when he got out of that hearing that he needed to get out of Dodge. And it was right at that time, when he's worried about his own safety, that he receives a knock on his door there. And he opens it up, and there's this middle-aged Spanish man, dressed really well with a nice powdered wig and everything. And he tells Franklin that he represents the embassy of Spain. He's the secretary of the embassy. Now, in Spanish lore, a secretary isn't the person that types and takes notes. The secretary is the assistant. So if you go to the archives of the Indies and you meet the secretary, that's the deputy director in our parlance. You have to translate from English, And he was the secretary from the embassy, and he was coming to Franklin to ask if there was any way he could purchase a glass harmonica for his sister. Now, that was a bold-faced lie. And Franklin said, well, I have two. One's in Philadelphia and the other one's in disrepair, and I really don't want to sell it. I'm sorry. But, there's this woman who performs with the glass harmonica here in London. Go see her. And he went to see that woman, and she said, no, that's my glass harmonica, and I perform with it. I can't give it up. And so the man went back, and he, confronted Franklin again and told Franklin the truth, that actually the harmonica is for the prince, the third son of the King of Spain. And the prince's name comes down in history as Don Gabriel de Bourbon. And Don Gabriel was 22 years old. By all indications, a very intelligent, open-minded young man. He played music, he composed music. In fact, the great composer Solar, who got famous because of the movie, Mozart's great rival, Solar, was Don Gabriel's teacher. And Don Gabriel also translated old Latin documents into Spanish. So he was really interested in this new instrument that Franklin had supposedly, everybody thought, and probably did, invent. And the glass harmonica is this. See, I know some of you are thinking like a harmonica that you play and slap your knee. No, it's that. And basically what it is glass bowls pitched to different notes on a spindle. That's a clavichord case, incidentally. And you see the front drawers there. Well, those take water. And then the bottom, you pump the thing so the bowls are spinning against you. And you wet your fingers. And a lot of us have done this, in a drunken stupor with a wine glass, right? And then you make the sounds. And this has become a sensation in its day. And that's why the prince wanted to get this instrument. It was, Mozart wrote music to the glass harmonica. Think about that. All these great composers writing glass harmonica music. Probably none of you have a recording of one. And if you do, you don't listen to it often, except for maybe Halloween. Perfect at Halloween, because make it really. And also, it didn't last long because the bowls were made out of lead, and so that caused problems. People used them too much. And because people were getting sick using it, then because of the sound, the wistful sound, Europe being how it was then, there somehow it was associated with witchcraft and something bad. So it lost its popularity. But that was a little bit after. The guy from the embassy he reported back to Spain, because, he was sent there at the behest of the royal house. And he describes Franklin as a philosopher who is the best person in the world. It's music to our ears. We like that. And then when he decided that he had to tell him the truth, that it was actually for the prince, Don Gabriel, he wrote back justifying that he gave up the secret because he thought Franklin, as an honorable man, an honorable good man that he is, and he writes this, that he is, I felt that there should be no secrets, and I told him. So Franklin provided the glass harmonica, gave it to him. But he said, you have to get it repaired. And of course, the Spanish embassy had no idea how to repair it. Franklin did. He had his man who would do it. So Franklin directed the guy to it, and the guy, he fixed it. And then Franklin charged, and this was the deal he made with the Spanish embassy, you have to pay for the expense of fixing it. But even that, Franklin got a discount. It was like 17 shillings for this instrument that the prince wanted. It was shipped to Spain, to Madrid. Don Gabriel received it. And meanwhile, Franklin returned to Philadelphia. But Don Gabriel was so pleased that this famous man, and Franklin was famous in his day, he sent a letter, but he also sent one of the books that Don Gabriel had translated. The book is Salistio Crispo's La Conjuración de la Catalina de la Guerra de Jugurtha, which is Salist, we know in English, is the author, this Roman writer, the 1st century BC, who wrote a history of war in Rome. And he translated this to Spanish and had bound. Franklin never played it, incidentally, but that's how you would play it. And this is the book. This is the very book that the Princess of Spain sent to Franklin. It followed him to Philadelphia. Franklin received the book, and it was also a limited edition. That's the outside of the book, and then the title page. It's at the Greineke Library at Yale. They were surprised when I asked them about it, and I found out it was there because hardly anybody, they've been years since anybody had asked to see it, like it had been forgotten. It's kind of amazing. Franklin described the book as beautifully and magnificently printed, and he considered it typographically superior to the best printing in Paris. So then Franklin felt obligated to thank His Highness, the Prince. And he wrote a letter. And this letter becomes really interesting because here's the beginning of the diplomacy. He thanked His Highness for his much esteemed present of your excellent version of Sallust. And then he said, in lieu of sending another book in return, I want to use the opportunity to send a copy of the late proceedings of the Continental Congress. He used that opening to suggest that Spain's wise politicians may contemplate the first efforts of a rising state that will likely soon be a part of some importance on the stage of human affairs. Now, this is before the Declaration of Independence. And Franklin's already predicting the revolution and what it's going to mean to world history. It's an amazing statement in its day. He then proposed that Spain and the United States had common interests and that they should be close allies. And that a good foundation already existed in the colonies because of a well-informed people. I don't know about that anymore. I think he was exaggerating then, too. But because of a well-informed popular opinion entertained here of Spanish integrity and honor. Now, of course, Franklin's, basically sucking up to the prince, right? We'll see. But he also continued the letter that you see in front of you, and in case you have any doubts, here's the last page where he signed it. He continued and said that his advanced years probably would prevent him from seeing the extent of this great contest that he could foresee. Franklin wrote this letter in December of 1775. So we're talking 7 months before the Declaration of Independence. Shortly thereafter, he was appointed to that secret committee of correspondence by the Continental Congress. And then he was assigned to go to Paris to negotiate with European countries to become allies of the rebelling colonies. Silas Deane and Arthur Lee were the other two members of that committee, so there were 3 of them. He arrived in Paris on December 21st, 4 days before Christmas, in 1776. And he had to deal with one of the great guys. There he is. This is one of the better depictions of him. This is the Conde de Aranda. You can hear the music in the background. The Conde de Aranda. His personality was just like that. His full name, I don't know, is Pedro Pablo Arbaca de Bolea, the Conde de Aranda. When they first met, Aranda had served a long and distinguished diplomatic career and military career. You can't tell from this painting, but in other portraits you can. He had I guess we'd call it a lazy eye now, but he also had a kind of a quirk where he couldn't turn his head from a military wound that he'd received in military action. But he was super intelligent, super experienced. He was 57 years old, which made him 13 years younger than Franklin at the time. The Conde de Aranda was Spain's ambassador to France. So that's the guy Franklin and Silas Deane and Arthur Lee are going to have to deal with. What kind of guy is he? Besides being intelligent, he was also opinionated, well-traveled, and at times a difficult and stubborn man. Oh, this is going to be fun, right? He had a sense of position, forthrightness, and confidence. He was a legend in his own mind. He could turn an obscure point into a time-consuming ordeal, or when he wanted, brilliantly cut to the point. His own king referred to him as obstinate and stubborn, more obstinate and stubborn than an Aragonese mule. But he was important to the king. And the fact that he's in Paris is indicative that they didn't want him in Madrid because he was a pain in the como se llama. But they valued him and they put him in the most important diplomatic position in the world from the Spanish point of view, Paris. So this is the guy that Franklin's going to deal with. Now Franklin is the head of the committee. Got there a little late and caused problems for the Count of Vergennes, who was the Minister of State of France, because the Spanish knew exactly when Franklin arrived in northern France and couldn't figure out why Franklin was taking so long to get to Paris, and so they accused the French for sequestering Franklin. And so that created, right away, there's a conflict going on. But they got over that. Let me show you Vergennes, just so you know. And Vergennes actually, in one of his letters, says about the Conde de Aranda, he says, "I never met an ambassador like this man." You know, so he had his reputation. When Franklin and the 3 guys finally got together, they notified Aranda that they wanted to meet with him right away. So he answered them and said, "Okay, we need to meet, but let's meet after dark. Paris is full of spies. Spain's a neutral country, as is France. So we'll meet in my house, his residence, that reputedly had the finest silver place setting in all of Paris. John Adams' wife, Abigail, accused him of having 100 and some servants, which wasn't true, but that was an exaggeration. She was aghast at his opulence. So they had their first meeting, and the first meeting went on for 2.5 hours. And that's about the result of it. Aranda reports to Madrid, he says, we met for 2.5 hours. And the Americans proposed nothing, just to be friends. And Aranda, being Aranda, just actually at one point blurted out, I would think in the situation that you're in, you'd come here asking for aid rather than friendship. I mean, he actually stunned Franklin. And Franklin was apologizing for the other two and said, I'll write a report to tell you what the Continental Congress wants. And Aranda comes back and says, you've been at sea for 2 months. You didn't have time to write that report? You didn't prepare? So, I can just see Franklin reeling from this guy, that they needed to get help from. The other thing that Aranda said in that first meeting is that after those 2 hours, he wasn't sure that they accomplished much of anything, not only because the American Commission didn't ask for anything, but because Franklin speaks very little French, Silas Deane less, and Arthur Lee none at all. Now, if you look on the next slide there, where the first paragraph is, that's where he says it. Franklin, let me read it on there. Franklin habló muy poco francés, Deane mucho menos, y nada Lee. So I guess our first diplomats to Europe set a tradition that we've kept ever since. I know we think Franklin, this genius of a man, he went there, he just fluent in French. But not when he got there, he wasn't. After a time, I'm sure he picked it up, because there's no better way than learning another language than meeting a woman or another guy if you're a woman, right? And Franklin did a lot of that, even at his age, so I'm sure he was picking it up real quick. He wasn't from the diplomats, though. So that first meeting, incidentally, took place on December 29th, 1776. And he was informed, our diplomats were informed that Spain and France were already, giving aid covertly to the colonies. It strikes me from the documents that there's no mention that none of the three men knew that aid was coming from Spain and France. I don't understand how they could not have known that, but there's nothing in the documents. In fact, one of the things that this company that was formed, and I want to give you the name of it here, was Rodrigue Hortlitz Essay. Rodrigue is for Rodriguez, the Spanish name in the thing. And it was run by Pierre Beaumarchais, who is the author of The Barber of Seville. So for all of you that like that stuff, there it is. And of course, Beaumarchais got in trouble because he was siphoning some of the money off for himself. Another tradition that hasn't died. And that company was formed with 2 million pesos, which, to make things simple for you, I equated in 1992 as 1 peso fuerte, Spanish peso, was equivalent of a 1992 $30 American. Okay? So you can do the mathematicians can compute and share it. So each of them contributed 2 million pesos each to start this company. That's a lot of money back in the 18th century. And that was to send aid and supplies there. And the very month that Franklin and these people arrived in Madrid, the Spanish governor, the king of Spain, had ordered all his officials in the Americas, including the governors of Louisiana and Cuba, to quickly supply the Americanos with what gunpowder and rifles that were available. And the aid that was shipped on free ships, which was important. If you're a neutral country, then you have free ships, and free ships can't be boarded, in theory. There were pirates and other things going on illegally, but that was the idea. So there's already aid going to the colonies. Well, they continue to have meetings. Franklin finally gets the report written. And at one point, Franklin tries to present Aranda with a document. And Aranda says, no, I can't receive that, make a copy. And Franklin says, no, we have our own copy. This is the original copy, it's yours. This is necessary for you to have it. And that document is this. It's a document from the Continental Congress signed by John Hancock. See, the big signature, you all know the story. He signed the Declaration of Independence real large because he wasn't afeard of the British. He signed everything large. Actually, I think he was nearsighted. The document is written by the same scribe who wrote the Declaration of Independence, actually, who penned it. So it's the same document. And this document is an interesting document because I'm going to read from here because I can't see it there. It says that Congress has instructed Franklin to communicate, treat, and conclude with His Most Catholic Majesty, that's the King of Spain, His Most Christian Majesty is the King of France. They have these titles over there. So he's going to conclude with His Most Catholic Majesty, the King of Spain, a treaty for the just purpose for the assistance in carrying on the present war between Great Britain and these United States. They weren't even a country yet, and they're starting to call themselves the United States. Good choice of names. Well, that document essentially tells Aranda that Franklin is sent there to deal with Spain. But Franklin wanted to make clear what that document meant, and so he had a letter handed to Aranda at the same time. And in that letter, which is here, and I just, if you look 4 lines down, you'll see the word minister plenipotentiary. Franklin explains to Aranda that the document that he just gave him names him minister plenipotentiary. Now, I know there's somebody out here who's worked in diplomacy, worked for the State Department. You know that's the key term, that's what an ambassador is, the minister plenipotentiary. The rest of the people are just chumps, in the office. But if you're the minister plenipotentiary, you are the ambassador. So Benjamin Franklin was actually named the first ambassador to Spain by that document and the Hancock document. And Franklin asked if he could go to Madrid as the minister plenipotentiary. Now, from the Spanish point of view, this is a rebellion, secretly aiding, right? And there's no country yet. We celebrate our independence from 1776, but I got news for you folks. We didn't become a country until 1783. I mean, it was iffy until then. That's why we fought had all these battles. That's what George Washington was doing. It wasn't certain that they were going to win. They were a series of states united in the conflict. Actually, three of the British colonies stayed out of it, but 13 stayed in. And so from the Spanish point of view, it says, you can't be a diplomat from a country that doesn't exist. So, and we're supporting you. We want to see you succeed because we don't like the British. So you stay in Paris and deal with Aranda. Oh, great. Just great. And Franklin, in another letter, acknowledges the importance of maintaining Spain's neutrality and not causing any kind of conflict by him going to Madrid and letting the spies see him dealing with the upper reaches of the Spanish government. So the contact continued. They kept having meetings. And aid, finally, Spain decided not to cooperate with France, and sending aid would do it on their own. And Franklin also acknowledged something that was real important in all these negotiations. He would operate with France as he would with Spain, as if each were the other. France and Spain had a compact with each other called the Bourbon Compact, where they cooperated. And so both Vergine, the Minister of State of France, and Aranda made clear to Franklin, Dean, and Lee that what you say to us, the French will know. And what you say to the French, we will know. Of course, our guys, being what they are, tested it a couple of times. And those couple of times, I'm here to tell you, it didn't work at all. And I think in those couple of times, they didn't know that it didn't work. And the way I know it worked is because they went on those occasions to France to say something that was different from what was said to the Spanish on the same subject, and the French document ended up in the Spanish archives. So how did that happen? Yeah. So Spain and France were really cooperating. Franklin's on record, finally, of thanking Spain for the supplies and money. And Aranda kept him abreast of the different shipments going out. One of the companies that was sending those shipments was a firm run by a guy by the name of Diego de Gardoqui. Gardoqui. Can you all say Gardoqui? Come on, Gardoqui. It's kind of a fun name to say, Gardoqui, right? Yeah, you're mumbling Gardoqui. Diego Gardoqui was an inheritor of a banking firm and merchant company in Bilbao. He was Basque. And he ran it out of Bilbao. He had been trading with New England illegally, breaking the British blockades and stuff for years. And he spoke English, and our merchants in New England were familiar with Diego Gardoqui. And a little sidelight here, one of the few extant portraits, an oil portrait of Diego Gardoqui, is in the collections of the Palace of the Governors. Yeah, all right. You learned something new tonight. It's there. It was found in an attic in Philadelphia. And modesty prevents me from telling you how it got to the Palace of the Governors. After the colonial victories at Saratoga under Horatio Gates, that was our first really big victory of the colonies, Franklin embarked on a policy of trying to scare France and Spain into the war. He says, see, we've won a victory. And he told Spain, France is going to join us because, England, with our victory, England's thinking about suing for a peace, and they're just going to turn on you. Right? And it scared France enough where they decided they better get in the war. So they signed a treaty with the colonies. And Article 13 of that treaty said that when Spain gets involved in the war, they will be an equal partner to that treaty. So made sure that Spain was going to be in it. France actually asked Spain's permission to do it. There's a great letter from the King Louis the 16th. I like to call him the last, Louis the last. Remember Louis the last and Marie Antoinette, what happened to him? As a result, probably of helping our independence, they broke their country and the people rebelled and they lost their heads. Louis writes to my dear uncle, the King of Spain, Carlos III, basically says, we have this plan. We're going to surprise the British fleet in New York and end the rebellion and win the independence for the colonies and, thereby, get the British where they don't like it. What do you think? And the Minister of State for Spain, the Conde de Floridablanca, I love all these condes, he says, I don't think that's a good idea. But the young king of France wanted to do something besides give covert aid. And the idea was they're going to send their fleet to New York before war is declared. But the commander of the fleet will open his letter halfway there and see that war has been declared. And so he'll get there before the British in the colonies and the British fleet will know that war has been declared and thereby surprise them. Great idea, huh? Yeah, hesitation. It didn't work. There were spies everywhere. The British got wind of it. Word was there. The British fleet was waiting outside of New York. And Admiral de Grasse, the French admiral, chose not to engage him. So it failed. And it's at that moment that Vergennes, the Minister of State of France, wrote to his king and said, and these are exact words, "Pray, sire, that Spain joins us or we are lost." Figure it out? I'm a simple-minded historian. Pray, sire, that if Spain doesn't join us, we are lost. If France can't beat Great Britain, what's that mean for the colonies? They're lost. The French knew that. So they turned to Spain. And Franklin's in the middle of all of this. Man, you got to get into the war. What do you want, Spain? What's the deal here? Spain says, well, we want Gibraltar. That's easy enough. We want the Mediterranean island of Minorca. We want the British out of the Mississippi River. We want them out of Central America. We want Florida back. And Florida at that time included Mobile and Pensacola. That's all we want. Vergennes replied to his king about Spain's gigantic demands. But, it was like a poker game. Who's holding the cards? Right? You're either all in or you're out. So France agreed to that, but still Spain didn't join it. And that gives rise to our historians, to the heritage of our historians, of not acknowledging the role of Spain in our independence, because they didn't join the war with France. And then they didn't get into it right away. They hesitated. In our early history books, back in the day when football coach was teaching me, basically hinted that maybe Spain was betraying the colonies because it was negotiating directly with Great Britain. I'm here to tell you all the documents show the exact opposite. And Aranda was real clear to Benjamin Franklin. Go on to the next one here. He told Franklin, and this got to the Continental Congress, that the Count of Floridablanca, the Minister of State, was a consummate diplomat. And now that he had all the cards, now that Spain had all the cards, he could say to Great Britain, we will stay out of the war, but you got to sign a peace. And Britain came back and said, but that doesn't include the independence. Spain said, that's not even a matter of discussion. Independence is part of that peace. He was negotiating directly with Great Britain and holding off. The other thing he was holding off for was a military consideration. Remember I said that the largest armada of the war was sent to South America? It was very successful, but they were waiting for it to get back to Europe so they could use it when they got into the war there. Well, those negotiations didn't work, but I brought some quotes just because it always mystified me why our historians, even in our own papers of the Continental Congress, could see that Spain was somehow negotiating for our independence. And they never chose to use that. Now, don't ask me why, because I don't know. I could only guess. I'll find those quotes. So this is 1779. Franklin wrote that Spain had been negotiating with England, insisting on American independence. In fact, if not in appearance. Get more definite than that. And that Spain's attempts had been rejected, and Spain was preparing for war. Franklin was exactly correct in that summation. George Washington wrote to John Jay, who was president of the Continental Congress and was soon to be named ambassador, the second ambassador to Spain. England's failure to take advantage of Spain's offer of mediation is more strongly tinctured with insanity than she has done in the course of this contest. Then he added that the only excuse for Great Britain's action is its obstinacy. And then I know whenever we talk about founding fathers, there are John Adams fans. John Adams wrote in May of 1779. He stressed that Spain's assistance was the key to victory. He knew it. And that Spain had become powerful and influential. And then after Spain's declaration of war in June of 1779, June 21st, he wrote that Great Britain would have to concentrate on its European enemies, thus leaving the colonies to our safe and lasting peace. Our founding fathers knew that Spain was the linchpin in all of this. Now, I share a personal story. I gave this talk, or a variation of this talk, a few years ago up in New England. You can imagine, right? There's this room, and the things cascaded up, and they were all desks. So all I could see were these heads looking down on me. You know, and it was like in the round. It was like, I guess, being before the Inquisition. And so I had all these New England Ivy League professors looking down on Tom Chavez from New Mexico, who's telling them about their war. You know, how can some bofo from New Mexico know anything about our war, right? And I could see, you know, that they had these jaundiced looks. They were just ready. So I had to pause for a second. And I said, folks, you don't have to believe me. Read the footnotes. Read the quotes. I think John Jay and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin knew more about what was going on then than you did. That ended that. Of course, I haven't been invited back either. I have been invited to St. Louis, so it's moving in that direction. 5 minutes? Okay, well, I'm going to have to skip some stuff. 5 minutes. Maybe I shouldn't do anything. All right, so what happened is, you know, Spain got involved in the war. Spanish soldiers fought British soldiers. Spanish soldiers died fighting British soldiers. Spanish contingents fought the British in the Gulf Coast. They defeated them, took Pensacola, defeated them at Mobile, Alabama, Baton Rouge in Louisiana, Manchac. Then up in St. Louis, they defended St. Louis. And then a Spanish contingent went in the middle of winter, if any of you are from that part of the country, all the way to St. Joseph, Michigan. And our historians, I read one article published on it when I was first researching, said that was all made up. And then I found not only one, but two versions of the journal on that journey. And they sacked and burnt the British fort in St. Joseph, Michigan. So they fought there. They fought in Central America, and they fought in Europe. And then they died. And they gave so much money that it became the basis of our first currency. And all of you are old enough to know what 2 bits are. I talked to a high school class, and they have no idea. 2 bits. Where does that come from? It came from the Revolutionary War, from the pesos that the Spanish gave, because those pesos were also known as pieces of 8. And 2 bits is what? 1/4. That's where that comes from. And of course, we know the dollar sign came from that too. Some of you heard me say it. Our accountants, when they get the pesos that were incidentally minted, most of them were minted in Mexico, from the silver in Mexico. So the next time we complain about Mexico, let's ask what we owe them for our independence. And our accountants would get these pesos and they'd put the symbol for the royal symbol for Spain, which is the columns of Hercules with ribbons going through it. So you look at the first dollar signs as 2 lines with an S, which became 1 line and an S, because of Spain's monetary support for our independence. So all this happened. Benjamin Franklin was in the middle of this, and there's a lot of information about that. And I'm going to be real interested when this new documentary comes about Franklin in Paris, if his connection with Spain is even involved or mentioned. So the point is, like New Mexico history, which I love dearly, our history is inclusive. New Mexico's history is inclusive. It's why we're all here who were here before. We didn't win our independence just because a bunch of British subjects rebelled. They had the help of other countries. They had the help of other religions. They had the help of soldiers who were recruited out of Latin America. And they sure had the help of money minted in Mexico. And just so you can go home feeling happy about where we are, a tax was collected in New Mexico. 2 pesos for each citizen or subject, if you will, resident. 2 pesos, which is, $60 by 1992 standards, right? And 1 peso for each Native American. Governor Juan Bautista de Anza collected that money. It was over 4,000 pesos. The exact amounts in the book. And sent down to Mexico City and then on to Spain. All the states that were part of the Spanish Empire at that time collected a tax, including Mexico and Latin America paid a tax. And the other thing I want to leave you with is the church, the Catholic Church, the Spanish Catholic Church, headquartered in Toledo, Spain, sent word out to all the other cathedrals telling them to contribute to the war. Spain, the King of Spain, struck up a deal with the church. Support the war and we'll forgive the taxes on you until the debt is made up. And so if you go to Malaga, Spain, there's a great legend that one of the towers wasn't finished because the chapter house got the word that they had to give money, or they were supposed to give money to the cause, and they, instead of spending the money that they had for finishing their tower, they gave it, sent it off to the government to fight the war. And they never finished the tower. And if you go to that cathedral and look around on the walls, you see a plaque there that says, American independence was paid for by this cathedral and the people of Malaga. They're very proud of that. They're very proud of it. And it's a history we should know. Because one of the acts that we rebelled about was the Quebec Acts. And when the Quebec Act, part of that was our New Englanders were mad because England had allowed the Catholics in what is today Canada to have a bishop. And guess who ended up winning the war for us? Catholic France and Catholic Spain. Ironies abound in history, which makes it fun. So my time is up. 5 minutes on the dot. Thank you. So now I get 15 minutes of questions, right? No? 5 questions? Yeah, 5 questions. Hurry up, hurry up. I see you over there. I can't hear the whole question, but I think you asked if I'm going to watch the series. Okay. Yeah, I will. But I'm a historian. I'm awful. I go to the movies, they didn't wear zippers. I haven't watched the Napoleon thing yet because the book I'm writing now has something to do with Napoleon in Spain, and so I know it's going to ruin it for me. So, but I will watch it. Yes. Next question. That's a whole nother lecture, Elmer. Thank you. What is the story of Bernardo de Galvez's part in this? Galvez was the commander out of New Orleans and then Havana, Cuba, that won the victories in the Mississippi River and the Gulf Coast. He's the big hero right now, but Elmer, I want to lay on you. There's another hero, Francisco Saavedra, who was a good friend of Galvez's, and that's a different lecture. Invite me back next week. I'll tell you about that. Next question. Oh, and by the way, Galveston is named for his ship, which is named for him, Bernardo de Galvez. Oh, and I'll tell you a story. I was invited to Mexico City to give a talk about Bernardo de Galvez, and he died in Mexico City as the viceroy. He was beloved down there. They buried him in San Fernando Church in the walls there. And so this group, the Granaderos y Damas de Galvez, they're big supporters of their hero, they wanted to put a reef there at his tomb. And they asked me to take a picture with the reef in front of the tomb. And I read the marble slab there, and it said, here lie the remains of Matias de Galvez. It's a weird way of spelling Bernardo, right? Matthias was his father, who preceded him as viceroy. And there was nothing there indicating Bernardo was there except a contemporary plaque. It says, well, maybe it's on the other side of the altar, so go over there. There's another contemporary plaque for Bernardo. So we're looking for Bernardo again. He's in that church someplace. Next question. Right here. Yes. Not with me. Do I have a picture of Gardoki? Not with me. It's going to come out in my next book, though. No, not there's another book after Christmas. The second book's coming out, and he will be in that. Okay. By the aisle.
Can you talk a little bit about the Spanish black legend in the context of this all right now?
Spanish what? I didn't hear that. The Spanish what? Oh, the Black Legend. That's another lecture. I mean, it really is, and I could give it. But the Black Legend grew out of European rivalries in the 16th century with the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. England took up the lead of the Reformation, Protestantism. Spain took up the lead of Counter-Reformation, and resulted in a century of wars. And of course, when you get into wars, you get into all the prejudices and biases that each side accuses the other. And we inherited in this country the Protestant view of the Counter-Reformation, which was led by Spain, and of course to Latin America. And so it all comes together again real quickly over the centuries with all these people from both countries who came and populated the Americas, right? And from our country's heritage is a story of east to west movement through the wilderness, and we became different because we met all these different people and learned about different foods and even lost our British accent. It was just awful. And but the people from the Counter-Reformation went south, in our case, Mexico City, and they did the same thing, only they were moving south to north. And of course, they got here, didn't they? We were an island in the wilderness. But here's where the choque, the meeting, the Santa Fe Trail and the Camino Real met here. The ultimate ending of that meeting of those people, the descendants of those rivals from Europe that still had in their cultural baggage the prejudices of yesteryear. So we inherited in this country the biases of the Protestant Reformation, which became the Black Legend, which basically says the Spanish are all kind of yellow-toothed, lazy, criminals. We haven't heard that before, have we? And of course, idol-worshiping Catholics. That's it in a nutshell. There's a whole lecture there. Thanks for bringing that one up. And incidentally, that's one reason that our historiography doesn't include Spain in the independence of our United States. That very attitude. After the revolution, Spain's involvement was quickly forgotten. And no one could tolerate, having those people help us with our independence. Last question, right there. He's asking if he can use our friendship, which he says loosely, a Spanish soldier from yesteryear, Mr. Garcia. But this is what our presidial soldiers would have looked like during the time of the American Revolution.
His family dates back to the 1800s here. And they came with the first Spaniard, and he found out that he traced to one of his ancestors that was stationed at the then Spanish presidio right here in Santa Fe. So they by the way, when we found all this out and what Dr. Chavez was speaking about, they were able to join the Sons of the American Revolution. Anyway, he is the past president of the Sons of the American Revolution in New Mexico. day for that call.
Okay. Thank you, Elmer. I think that's all my questions, right? Okay. Well, thanks all of you for coming. Drive safely. See you next time.